Let's start off with that late-stage trial. Investors obviously responded very positively to it. I want to ask you, when it comes to these rare diseases and genetic disorders that you really focus on, how big of a market is that here in the U.S. and globally?
Yeah, rare disease market. So we're approved now for three rare genetic causes, the largest of which is about 4,000 to 5,000 patients here in the United States. You can build a very good business around that. The recent results we released is for a slightly larger population, 5,000 to 10,000 patients who have a different form. It's caused by injury to the hypothalamus. And those patients are largely diagnosed and treated by endocrinologists today. So the challenge for rare diseases often is that the numbers may be okay, but many or most of those patients are not diagnosed. And what a rare disease company does is works hard to help those patients get to a diagnosis.
All right. So, I mean, of course, the availability of that drug is very important for your patients. On a day like this, I do have to ask you quite a bit about tariffs. So, China announcing it's escalating its tariffs against the U.S. The U.S. clarified its tariff stance against China yesterday. Both tariffs above 100%. What does that mean for your business? How much do you manufacture outside the U.S.? I see you get about 27% of your revenues outside the U.S., but how much manufacturing?
Yeah, so our manufacturing is based in Europe. Again, a rare disease, our volumes are relatively low. So to be honest, the impact of tariffs to Rhythm today will be relatively small. My much greater concern, I think, is for one, the sector as a whole, and it hits at multiple levels. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is incredibly complex and highly regulated. So you don't easily just shift. In addition to the capital expense of building a new plant, it's not as easy to just shift your process to a new location. So that's going to be one barrier to this. It takes about 5 years to build a new plant. The vast majority of small biotechnology companies in the US, like Rhythm, don't own their own manufacturing. They work through contract manufacturers, and supply and capacity is an issue. And so how that all evolves, this may put additional pressure in terms of capacity and where people are looking to manufacture their products.
So,
and the last piece, one last thing, Frank.
of course.
I think on the generic side, if we think writ large, I mean, the branded products may have more margin to work with, but 90% of the biopharmaceuticals that we consume in the U.S. are generic, and those are working on much thinner margins.
Okay, I want to go back to that. I was going to ask you about that. So according to the latest data from the FDA, it's actually about 91%, so you're pretty much spot on there. But you also say that the majority of the production of those generics, it comes from China. So how big of a risk is this trade war for the availability and the affordability of some of these generic drugs?
Yeah, I think it's going to hit both of those. And I mean, the China impact, one is just to the extent that drugs are made there and being shipped to the U.S., of course, both, availability and price is going to be an issue. But just in terms of the whole sector, I mean, China is investing heavily. And I think the U.S., which has had a major advantage in terms of our position, this biopharmaceutical industry is an incredible strategic asset. And China is rapidly advancing and caught up if they're not there already. So I think this is impacting multiple aspects of this, part of our world.
Also want to ask you about what's going on here in the United States at HHS, specifically the FDA. I'm looking at a headline from the AP from yesterday. FDA reverses course on telework after layoffs and resignations threaten basic operations. How big of a deal is this? A couple thousand people laid off from the FDA when it comes to drug approvals, trials like the one that you just had, and also availability of the drugs that people need for rare diseases and other diseases.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the FDA. I mean, I think it's an incredibly hard job. They do a fantastic job doing what they do, and we're extremely lucky to have an agency like that gives us confidence that the drugs we take are safe and effective. So, and historically, they're under-resourced. So when you lay off a large number of people from an organization like that, you're going to put it under increased stress. And yes, I think it is going to put at risk some of the reviews and potentially slow down the rate at which new medicines are being brought to patients. Now, that said, I think they have good leadership, and my hope is both for the FDA and the NIH that the leadership is left alone and allowed to manage their organizations.